Good afternoon. Today I have with me James Lewis, Lead Solutions Engineer for our DoD and IC and Special Operations Forces. We are joined today. Well, first, thanks for joining us for our 4th virtual training webinar. Today, we're excited to add a few co-hosts to our webinar. From L3Harris, we have Ben Wolf, who is a conflation expert and a product manager for one of our software suites called MapMerger, which allows you to merge vector content from different databases. And from ESRI, we have Aaron Young, who's an account manager at NGA, and Matt Woodleaf, who's kind of a counterpart to James at ESRI, a solutions engineer. If you've joined us for our previous webinars, you've heard a few times about how you can use ENVI's analytics in ArcGIS Pro and ArcMap. Today, we'll go into more depth and show you exactly how powerful that connection can be. A lot of you participating in today's webinar have access to both ENVI and ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, but you only work with one and not the other, or maybe you're a little afraid to experiment with one or the other. By the end of the hour today, it's our hope that we'll be able to demonstrate to you that using both will help you create more advanced products that support all facets of your operations. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Aaron Young from ESRI.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you to the L3Harris team for giving ESRI the opportunity to provide information on the enhancing the geospatial capabilities using ArcGIS platform technologies. Slide, please. All right, next slide. A little information about ESRI. ESRI is the global market leader in geographic information systems and offers powerful mapping and spatial analytic technologies. ESRI is an American company headquartered in Redlands, California, and we were founded in 1969 and support over 350,000 organizations helping our customers to solve geospatial problems. Here's a few things that you may not know about ESRI. We're the 5th largest privately held software company in the world, have zero debt, and reinvest over 31% of our revenue back into research and development. Slide. ESRI's focus is on supporting its users, including in the 350,000 organization, is 75% of the Fortune 500 and more than 11,000 colleges and universities. Slide, please. All right, so ArcGIS supports 3 fundamental systems. Including that is the system of record, which includes transactions, a system of engagement, which includes apps and maps, and a system of insight. And this system of insight is through analytics. And included with ESRI partnerships like ENVI, they help to extend the system of insight through advanced analytics. The benefits of working within the platform include data integration across the organization to deliver powerful capabilities. Slide, please. All right, ArcGIS provides an open platform technology. And what this is that ArcGIS, by design, is fundamentally an open platform supporting open standards and integrates open science libraries. We are committed to provide technical contributions to open source libraries, tools, and apps that support the entire geospatial community. All right, slide, please. All right, included also with this at the very end is our contact information. So if you have any questions, once again, my name is Aaron Young. I'm one of the ESRI NGA account managers, along with Matt Woodleaf. So if you have any questions related to ESRI, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Aaron. And as always, all of the contact info will be included at the end of the presentation. So you will have all of the contact info for the ESRI team at the end of the presentation. So kind of following the theme that Aaron said, you heard a couple of keywords, powerful analytics, the level of integration, the standing. I mean, if we think about it, most people know ESRI in some form. I would say that probably most of us on this call have at some point touched an ESRI product. So whether that be desktop or pro or server. And what we want to highlight is, by the end of this webinar, is that by utilizing the best of both worlds, we can really strengthen and create these more advanced products than we would be able to do using either or by themselves. So, you know, ENVI, a leader in image science, been around a really long time and kind of the go-to. But I think what a lot of people have always thought about ENVI is it's a hyperspectral thing. And you know, and that's honestly where we got our start. But ENVI handles so much more than that. And if you look at kind of the list of modalities or data types that we can analyze, you'll notice that vector data is the last one listed, and it's not because necessarily we can't create or read in vector data. It's because we're not a GIS tool, and that's why we asked our partners at ESRI to join in on this call, because like us for raster, they're kind of the go-to for vector data, and in other modalities, just like as you can see for us, we're the go-to for raster, but we can handle some you know, some generalized vector data. So in my initial statement, what I want to highlight by the end of this is that utilizing our powerful raster tools and their powerful GIS tools, you can really create analytics that before, I would say, were out of reach of an average user, mainly because you would have had to write code. And there may be some people who are on the phone now that are great scripters. And if you want to do that, I'm actually going to plug for our next webinar in 2 weeks, which is actually going to be IDL and Python. So we'll have some slides about that later. But everything that you'll see today is things that we can do now, being either a casual user, or even if you are a power user, you can take advantage of those two things. So like ESRI, you know, we have a wide span of where we are in the industry, from academic all the way up to utilities. And what we've seen is that in most of these, if not all of them, there is some component of ESRI there. And some of these places are actually already trying to take advantage, particularly in the Fed and civil, in the defense and intelligence space. I would probably say, at least from where I work, I've seen the most exploitation of utilizing both platforms together. So like ESRI, ENVI itself also has a generalized kind of a platform so that you can pick and choose the pieces that you need. And so depending on what it is that you want to accomplish, you may need one or more of these components. So today we're primarily going to focus on ENVI, the ENVI engines, and then the ArcGIS side of that. But any of these other pieces that you see here are also accessible within that ESRI platform. So from desktop all the way to cloud. So under that, there's a couple of key modules. And again, these modules have that same level of accessibility. So maybe your interest is SAR, and we have a dedicated SAR toolkit. Our last webinar actually was on SARscape. We actually have a subset of SARscape that plugs directly into Arc. It's all run from Arc. So now you're not even really doing the calling of the tools from ENVI. You're literally installing the ENVI Analytic in it. It has its own license and it's running by itself. But if you're in that unique environment where you actually have both, then you can take advantage of the full suite of SARscape tools if those were available, say, installed with ENVI. So what we're going to focus on today, as you saw it kind of pop in, is the ArcGIS integration side of that. So whether that be from our data support We have a long lineage in supporting a wide range of data sets, from current to future data sets, as we highlighted in the ENVI as a ELT webinar that we did a few weeks ago, to our automated workflows, our extensible modules, or from the scripting perspective. As I said, the next webinar will be on IDL and Python, integrating those two together, where you'll actually see how we can call GPTools, but all from the command line if that's your interest. But today, again, we're going to primarily focus on the desktop. So we're going to look at this integration from a couple of different angles. So there's what I would consider more of our legacy interoperability, which we've had for many, many years. It's robust and it works. This is pretty much all of our 32-bit support ESRI desktop. So if you're still a more of a classic ESRI desktop user, all of the things on this slide are things that you have access to, in addition to some of the things that I will talk about in some of the updates. So doing things like connecting to the various types of geodatabases. You'll notice that we still have personal there. There may be some legacy data that you have that you may not have moved into you know, a file or some other type of geodatabase. So if you happen to come across that, ENVI can, in 32-bit, connect to any of those geodatabase types. They can read and write. We can geolink, so meaning that I can have ENVI open, I can have ArcMap open, and I can literally link both views so that as I move around in one or zoom in, the same thing will happen in the other. The ENVI native. So if you're one of our defense and intel users and you have access to native data, we build the native module for ESRI. So there are ArcGIS extension for that. So saying that that same JITIC certified native technology that runs in ENVI can run there. So if whether you're writing the files in either or, they're going to play well. And we can preserve, you know, layers, your symbology layers. You can drag and drop. The drag and drop is one direction. So I can go in the table of contents of our desktop and grab a file and drag that into my ENVI. And from ENVI, what we do is something called push. So I can literally right click on a file in my layer manager and push that into Arc. And we're going to see some demonstrations of these things a little later in the presentation. And if you have some map templates, we don't support MXDs, but we do support the classic ESRI map templates. And really, this is one of those things where what we're trying to show is, hey, there may be a time where you've already started something in ENVI, but you've created the base template or that MXD for what you wanted to do in Arc, and you may, for whatever reason, not have access to that system. You know, Arc may be having an issue, but you still need to get that product out. So if you've saved it out as a template, then you can read that template into ENVI and still get your product out the door. So again, not to replace ArcMap, but really to show that we can complement that ArcMap. And if you're in a bind where, for whatever reason, it's not starting up for you, you can still create your products. So now we look at the integration. So as ESRI has, a few years now, Release Pro, we also began to upgrade our integration on a couple of different fronts. So continuing our partnership, we've also gone to what we call our task system. So if you're again a legacy ArcGIS user, you're probably familiar with GPTools or geoprocessing task. ENVI has something now called task. And the beauty of those tasks is it allows us to play within that ESRI ecosystem anywhere we need to. So whether that's from desktop or enterprise or in the cloud, we have a way to integrate our tools there. ENVI also has a modeler. And so that now enables people who, again, may not understand how to script, but definitely understand their image processing tasks that they want to do. Well, now you can graphically program. So a lot of the look and feel of ENVI has been set up to mimic ESRI. One, for muscle memory. Me being a military person, it is very annoying to have to learn a new piece of software. So even though every button is not an apples to apples, click for click, the look, general overall feel and flow of ENVI is very much like that of ARC. ENVI Py also allows you to call engines, the various ENVI engines, which we'll talk about a little later. And then the Python bridge that's native to ENVI also allows you to now do that programmatic integration. So if you are one of the more, technical people out there who like to write scripts, you can actually call ENVI task or processes all in the script, all in the same thing. And like I stated earlier, that will actually be our next webinar in 2 weeks. So how do we accomplish all of this? So for the desktop things, you have to start up 32-bit ENVI, and all of that general kind of what I call our legacy support is just there. So as long as you have a working ArcMap desktop and a working ENVI license, you're going to be able to do the drag and drop, the geo links. So what happens when you say, well, you know what, James, I want to add some ENVI tools. I don't know how to script. I want to add some ENVI tools into like my ArcGIS Pro, or even add some newer tools into my ArcGIS desktop. How do I do that? So we've made that super easy now. So what we have is an installer that comes with the install media or is accessible to you through the download site, something called ENVI Py and GSF Py. So ENVI Python and Geospatial Services Framework, which is what GSF stands for, which is all of our enterprise solution. We'll see a quick slide on that. There's an ENVI Py for desktop and an ENVI Py for ArcGIS Pro. Our current version is 1.3.1 that supports all the way up to Arc Pro 2.4. ENVI right now supports up to 10.7. With the release of 5.6 this summer, we will support 2.5 and all of the other versions of ARC. So this is all free. This is all of kind of the back end Python libraries already done. Like I said, quick, simple installer. It does everything for you. And that then enables you to quickly have access to our tools from within either ArcGIS Desktop or Arc Pro, or add tools to ArcGIS Server if you have the appropriate pieces. So on the left-hand side, you'll kind of see what that looks like. So if you're familiar with the older ENVI toolbox that would install, we had a couple of sets of different tools in there. And so we've since revamped that in these 10 tools that you kind of see in this right hand. So things like, some classification cleanup tools, some image band difference, ISODATA. Again, those are just example tools, but you'll notice that just below that, you see those ENVI management tools. And one of those scripts is the Create ENVI Toolbox. And so what that Create ENVI Toolbox enables you to do is basically anything that is a task within the ENVI suite of tasks, which we're over 200 and some odd tasks, or custom built tasks, can be called all from the ArcGIS tool. So what's the so what factor in that? The so what factor is that if you're not comfortable working in ENVI, you may have touched it once a couple of years ago, you touched it in college and haven't touched it, and now your new job says, hey, well, there's a process within ENVI to process this data type, but I want that included in some type of finished product. You may say, well, I don't really know how to use it. Well, the beautiful part about that is you can then add that tool, as long as it's a task, into your ArcGIS. And once it's there, it looks like any other ArcGIS tool. And again, we'll see some examples of those things. So here are some examples of like custom testing. So at the surface, you're like, okay, it's an HOZ finder or it's port activity. But they're not just kind of these, what I would say, typical tools, right? So like this custom port activity, could have started with could have been a SAR port activity. So for a customized change detection, because what we did was we created like some different types of masking. So these more, I would say, robust type of tools versus just a simple coherent change detection or a basic HOZ tool, because it now allows that freedom. So, and I say that to say that if someone has the knowledge to create algorithms, again, as long as those algorithms are then turned into what we call ENVI tasks, then those tasks are accessible. And then in this case, you see running from ArcGIS Pro. So we'll look at a couple more slides, and then we're going to have some live demos of kind of what some of these things look like. So in a flowchart perspective, this is kind of how, if you were setting this up, you would have your ENVI installed, you would have your ArcGIS tools installed, and then you would install the ENVI Py. Once ENVI Py, depending on what platform of Esri you're working on, whether that be desktop or Pro, you would, in this case, we're going to look at Pro, you would launch your Pro, you would log into your portal if your license isn't local to your system. You would create a new project or use an existing project. We do give you an out-of-the-box project purely to ensure that everything was installed correctly. I would not recommend using that as a base project to start from. It is just to say, hey, everything installed, everything's working as it should. If for whatever reason you get a new system, sysadmin does something, they tweak something, you may need to reconfigure your ENVI environment for your engine locations. And so what ENVI engines are basically, think of them as the analytics, right? So they're like the repository of the analytics. And so there's an IDL engine, so interactive data language. So our scripting language, there's an engine for that. There's a deep learning engine. So there's various engines. And so you may have to tell Arc, hey, that engine for that analytic you want to use is here. Once you set that, as long as your system doesn't get reinstalled or wiped, you shouldn't have to bother that configuration again. Once that happens, you then go to that script where you create your ENVI tool. You can add a new toolbox, you run your tool, and if you have access to Portal and to GSF on server and you've installed GSF Py, you could then publish that tool out to Portal or the results from that, and someone could have access to that. So we'll see some other examples. So from a model to model interactive. So okay, James, that's great. I can add tools, but I have a really awesome model that I've created in Arc, and one of my colleagues who's more on the image science side has created this really cool model in ENVI. How do I get those two things to play together? Totally simple. So from a model to model perspective, not happening, right? So the ENVI model, you can't open an ENVI model in Arc, and you can't open an ArcGIS model in ENVI. See, but you just said, James, that it was pretty easy and straightforward. It is. We do all the work for you. So what happens is you from ENVI would take that model and then create something we call a meta task. So when you think of a individual task, it's like a geoprocessing task, right? So it's a basically a program that does a specific thing. So that is a task. If you think about a change detection task, right? It does specifically change detection. But once we begin to chain those things together, so let's say if I take a classification task and I do a classification, smoothing, clumping, sieving, as I add in additional tasks, it then becomes what we call a meta task. So what happens is, once I create that, ENVI will actually write the code. So if I want it as a Python script, the modeler will write that Python script. I could then use the Python bridge and include that if I want to run from the script. But if I want to run it in desktop, I can go through, create the meta task, and what happens is I then have the option to publish that meta task, and you will notice that it gives me two options. I can either publish to ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. It will actually create the toolbox, do all of the Python connections for me, and then add that into my toolbox. Perfect world. We all know that sometimes we're not in a perfect world. So what happens, James? I may not have certain right privileges. How then does this functionality work for me? Absolutely. So what would happen is, in this scenario, let's say I don't have that perfect world where I can write to any folder I want to on my system. You simply do not check these two boxes. However, you ensure that you name your task and remember what the name of the task is, because you're going to have to input that task exactly how you spell it. It is not forgiving on that. So I generally take any man-made mistakes out of it. I just do a copy. You save it, you produce the task, and then you would just go through create the toolbox process. And so either way, you're able to get that model into, and then once that is a task, that task can then be dragged or added into your ArcGIS model. And again, I'll show some examples of that. So we can run those analytics as new GPTools. So you'll notice here, the ISODATA. So this is ENVI's ISODATA classification. However, it looks like any other ArcGIS Pro workflow. So from a learning curve perspective, you may have to learn, the different inputs, but the look and feel of it are exactly like any other ArcGIS workflow. So if I'm an analyst who's more comfortable working in Pro or working in desktop, that's an awesome thing, because now I don't have to learn a different look and feel for things. I just need to kind of understand what that workflow is. And so there's help associated with them, just like they would be within ENVI. So you get an understanding of what those various inputs are. So pretty cool. So that's all desktop stuff. So what happens now when I want to take the leap to enterprise? I have a on-prem server, or my group is high speed and we're doing a lot of cloud processing. I'm grabbing things from S3 buckets. How do we do that? So you need a couple of additional pieces of the ENVI platform. So you need GSF, which is the Geospatial Services Framework. That's kind of all of this back-end stuff you're seeing. And then you would need that GSF Py for ArcGIS, which again, the GSF Py is free. GSF is a purchased product. You would install that. That would then give you the ability to either run those same tools from your desktop, but now run them out on server, publish tools into portal, or wherever you want to, using the web app builder and build things. Access these more robust geospatial tools from a cell phone or a tablet. So a lot of stuff there. You're going to see a brief preview of what will be in ENVI 5.6 coming out. So what we've started now is, again, continuing to strengthen the integration with the ESRI products, and what a lot of customers are now moving to are portals. A lot of our customers are standing up portals. And what we want to do is make it as easy as possible for you to get your answers from ENVI, if you're in ENVI, into portal. Or maybe you're primarily a image scientist and you primarily work in ENVI, but you know that people who are GIS analysts, or quote the kind of capture all geospatial analysts, may have access to that portal and want that data as well. So what we didn't want you to have to continue to do is, okay, I have to find someone with Arc or have access to this portal and go out to a separate website. So with the release of 5.6, you will actually be able to connect to a portal. This is the 1.0 release, so it will be vector only. The next version will also include raster, so I want to be upfront with that. But the version that will come up with 5.6 will be for vector. But you would then put your vector, put your portal URL, your same user credentials, and you can even publish it as a service. And it's already all set up for you and push, but all from the ENVI desktop. So that's a really powerful thing. And again, this is a task, meaning you could call these things from the modeler. So if you wanted to automate a process where you were batch processing data and then have that data going into the portal, you could do that. So we'll see a little bit of that. And then of course we can do things like share as web layers, you could publish to groups. Again, taking advantage of those raster analytics in ENVI, but using them, again, in a platform where you may feel more comfortable. And the last piece of that, before we go into MapMerger, is like building web apps. So again, combining the best of these. So taking that new GP service that you might have created from the ENVI modeler or from an ENVI script, and allowing that to be shared out to other people where they can see things. So again, this is just an example where we used our crop science tool, but you'll notice powered by ENVI and GSF. Data from ESRI platform, but using our crop science tool in that environment. The web app builder is sweet because it is what I consider a low cost of entry into building web apps. Nothing is more frustrating to me from an analyst perspective than doing basic products that I feel as an analyst, I don't want to spend time doing basic products. I would rather just have an app where, hey, if we were a line of sight, right? That's a basic product. Hey, there is an ESRI image service with elevation data. I've created an app, give them some parameters, and any user should be able to go in and create those and print those off and do what they need to do. So again, I'm saying that to say that the access in bringing these two technologies together at any level is a really powerful thing. And I think once more people begin to exploit it, you'll really start seeing some really cool things starting to happen. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben from our side to talk about MapMerger.
Appreciate it, James. So what we wanted to present here today was kind of a comprehensive package here where we can take products from ENVI, the vector-derived data set, and we can use MapMerger, which is an extension of ArcGIS software, to integrate and conflate that data into your baseline holdings if you have a larger baseline vector data set that you've got for operations, emergency response, etc. So go ahead and go to the next slide, James. So fusing data from numerous sources is a challenge that is growing. You can get these sources from commercial data sets, from government entities that are also producing these data sets on their end. You can also get them from automated feature extraction software and algorithms that you might even find in the ENVI software platform. So taking all of these data sets from these multiple sources can be challenging, and it's not something that you just want to sit there and hammer away at it one feature at a time, attribute by attribute. So this is a big problem if you're looking to add these new data sets to your holdings. The final product at the back end of any kind of conflation and integration of new data needs to be a geometrically superior data set with more robust attribution. So these big problems require state-of-the-art solutions such as MapMerger. It's our 5-in-1 conflation solution that brings both the speed and flexibility that you would need for integrating these large data sets into your baseline holdings. Next slide, please. So again, I mentioned the automated feature extraction. In my experience, in my day job as a conflation analyst, I often have my hands on various data sets, some of which are automated feature extraction, and it's pretty apparent when an algorithm performs well to extract roads over certain types of imagery and when an algorithm doesn't necessarily do so hot. So instead of trying to design the one perfect algorithm, we can take the best of all of the algorithms and plug them into MapMerger to bring all of the pieces we want together for our vector data set. We can combine them, both attributes and geometry, to paint a fuller picture of the situation on the ground with our vector data set. So in this 2 screenshot examples here, on the left, we've got a pink city streets algorithm extracted those roads. And then we've got a green algorithm or a green data set that was extracted by an algorithm that specializes specifically in alleyways. By plugging both of these vector data sets into MapMerger, we can combine them with high rate of automation and come out on the back end with the blue data set on the right, where we have a functioning navigable road network with more robust attribution if that's present, and also, again, robust geometry is one of the major goals there. Next slide, please. Here are some example screenshots of what it'll look like when you get your data sets imported into MapMerger. You'll have a blue target baseline data set. That is what our baseline holdings look like currently. And then we've got our input source data set, which again could be commercial, government, automatic extraction, etc. The orange input source data set is substantially more dense than our baseline holdings, so we've got a great opportunity here to integrate lots of new features into our holdings to help make a more robust, readable map on the back end. So these next few slides are essentially going to, in a way, animate what it'll look like after you've imported and run our automated matching functions in MapMerger. So this is the right after import screenshot. Next slide. This demonstrates the matching capability of MapMerger. All these green dots and links that have been brought in are now essentially serving two functions. The first is that it is introducing connectivity between the data sets. So wherever we're introducing new features, these green links will make sure that they stay connected so our road network stays navigable. They also help guide attribute transfer. So where we have endpoints of feature in dataset 1 and endpoints in a feature in dataset 2, where they are both linked, we can then match them to transfer attributes if there are any to transfer. So the next slide, please, will show the significant drop in bright colors. Where you see those more earthy tones is where we've actually matched features. Where we've got those matched features, that's where we've got opportunity for attribute transfer. The brighter features, specifically the orange features in this case, are going to signify brand new features being brought into the data set. There are also going to be instances that are a little tough to see at this zoom, but if we get a chance to do a live demo here in a little bit, we'll be able to dive a little further into it. The bright colors also serve as an alert to an analyst using the software to investigate where you have a bright orange next to a bright blue. That's a good opportunity to investigate for another match that needs to be resolved with our manual matching tool set. There's a handful of tools. It doesn't take a ton of time to learn and get familiar with them, and the overall use of them is generally going to be minimal because the automated software solutions are going to handle a lot of the, and we'll say the majority of the cases in most data sets. So the next slide, please. This white layer is an output from MapMerger that shows exactly what our data set is going to look like on the back end. You'll notice that all of the features are connected appropriately at intersections. We've got some brand new geometry that wasn't present in our baseline data set previously. So this is what your final network is going to look like upon the creation of the result of MapMerger. So we've integrated our automated features, our commercial data set, our government data set, and it really is as simple as running the automated solution and then a manual review and QC of that, along with some minimal manual intervention. So that is a short and sweet version of the or explanation of the road conflation with MapMerger. The next slide, please, will go over some of the other functions in MapMerger that'll make it easier for analysts to use, specifically in an SDE environment. So in the same urban area here, we've got a building data set indicated in the green. We have probably too many buildings for one analyst to go through efficiently and effectively, so MapMerger has an automated tiling system built into it that analysts and users can use to help break the data set into more bite-sized chunks, which we'll see on the next slide, please. So the blue and orange that you saw on the previous screenshot is this particular cell that was automatically generated. This tile was automatically generated by our MapMerger software. It imported just the buildings we were interested in. Again, the baseline data holdings are the blue or darker blue data set. The orange is the potential new geometry, as well as the potential source of attributes to transfer to our authoritative baseline holdings. So next slide, we will see that they are matched again by the green links. These links in point data sets will match the features, and there's no need to go in beyond creating these links, as opposed to the network conflation, which involves 2 steps. Again, that's the point generation as well as the line matching. In this case, once we have matched our points, we can go through manually and review and correct where necessary, or introduce new links and matches where appropriate. And then the next slide will show what our final data set will look like. I left in this screenshot here a couple different layers. The white layer, again, is the results that MapMerger will produce after the 2 data sets have been combined. The brown data set indicates features that were our input sources, input source features were matched to a baseline feature and were subsequently left out of the final result because we don't want to have too many features representing a single feature over imagery. And that's more or less what we have decided here after our matching is complete, that our buildings have been represented appropriately by the baseline where those features in brown have disappeared, and the attributes have been transferred. So now we have a comprehensive data set where baseline buildings have been enriched and brand new geometry has been introduced where our baseline didn't previously have holdings, or didn't have coverage, excuse me. So that, I believe, is the last of our MapMerger slides here. Oh, sorry, we had a couple more. So again, we wanted to emphasize the comprehensive solution, combining ENVI and ESRI and MapMerger into how do you maximize your use of the data that you generate from start to finish. So we can take the automated feature extraction output from ENVI, and we can put it into an automated feature extraction engine. These will generally spit out highly accurate features, highly accurate geometry that potentially didn't exist in our baseline holdings. And MapMerger can then take those vector data sets and easily, highly automatically integrate them into our baseline holdings. So the result in that screenshot there of the different colored vector data sets would be conflation of attributes where appropriate, where the features match. And that would be followed by adding a new geometry, so our overall coverage is more robust. And that can be accomplished all within this ENVI ESRI MapMerger package that we've been describing so far today. So the next slide brings us to our demos, and I believe I'll be passing that back to you, James.
Yeah, awesome segue there, Ben. I just want to reemphasize kind of what Ben talked about specifically on that last slide. So, we've I think between the presentation that you've seen, the briefing you got from Aaron, what you've heard from myself, and what you just heard from Ben, I think we really kind of outlined this streamlined workflow of where we can process data, using some of ENVI's advanced analytics. I can call those within my ESRI tool of choice, pro or desktop or cloud environment, and run my advanced GIS processing. And then, as we've all, I'm sure, we've come across different data sets, and Ben so eloquently kind of explain how, well, now I'm gonna help streamline that process for you. So if we imagine just running kind of that end-to-end workflow that you saw in that last strip, that's a really, really powerful thing that, again, I can tell you from being in the community for a long time, has not been around, or that I've really been able to come across. It was generally, I do something here, I do something here, I do something here. And that can become pretty tedious when you're messing with large data sets. So what I want to quickly do, because I definitely want you guys to see, kind of MapMerger run. So I'm just going to quickly bring up a couple of examples of some things that can be done with some of the integration at the desktop. I'll show the portal integration and you know, kind of how everything looks once it's installed. And then I'm going to turn things over to Ben so that he can take you guys through kind of a quick demo of MapMerger. And then I want to definitely leave some time for some questions. I know we were generally scheduled for an hour, but if we run over a little bit, as long as you all can stay on, we'll definitely stand by to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, I'm going to come out of the presentation quickly. And what I'll do first is, what you should be seeing is you should be seeing ENVI over where I live, lovely. Well, I live just outside of Washington, D.C., but this is lovely Washington, D.C. And what I did was, you know, a typical workflow may be, hey, what foundational data already exists? So what I did was I used our OpenStreetMap importer to see if there was some OpenStreetMap data available. So there was some data available, it imported, it's already into shapefile format. So now what I may want to do is share this out with other users who are then going to take these files and move them into Arc and possibly use MapMerger to conflate them with some data files they've done. So how would we do that? So there's a couple of different ways. The old school way could have been, oh, I got to go out, I got to open portal, I got to go in the portal, I got to push, or I'm going to have to move them from ENVI. I'm going to have to open them up into my ArcGIS Pro, and then from ArcGIS Pro, I'm going to do. So you can already see just me describing what that workflow looks like. That's pretty tedious. And so what we've done is, for my purposes, this is just an extension. It will just be in the product of 5.6. So we have this nice new export vectors to ArcGIS portal that you saw in the slide. So it's pretty straightforward. You know, I select the layer that I want. So it can either be a layer I already have open or a layer sitting somewhere out on the system. You put your URL for your ArcGIS portal and put your credentials. You can name it, you know, whatever the vector file is. Then you have the choice to publish it out as a server. So once you click OK, some bunch of magic happens behind the scenes. I've logged into my portal instance. I can then go to my content, and I ran one earlier. Yeah, I don't want to bore you guys with status bars running. So I have this, you know, test vector in that I publish out as both a feature layer. So I have it as a service, so I can click this. This is our, this is the ENVI portal instance. And so now, once I have that out, I can actually go and do things like download the layer. I could update this data. I could open it in desktop, but maybe I just want to quickly glance at it. You know, I'm an analyst. I want to know if this is even relevant to the area that I'm in. And so this was actually derived from a LiDAR data set. So what I did was I did a feature extraction from a LiDAR data set and then uploaded that. So using ENVI LiDAR up to the point cloud, did the feature extraction, and then uploaded that in the portal. And I may say, yeah, this is exactly where I want it. But the beautiful part of this is now I can just begin doing things with this, again, all in one framework, because I could pull that directly, or I could have pulled that directly into my ArcGIS and begin working with it in ArcGIS. And so again, this functionality will be coming in 5.6, which again, this summer, July timeframe, it would just be a part of it, of the actual ENVI product. And then of course, ENVI has the ability to connect to the various ArcGIS datasets. In this case, because I am in 64-bit ENVI, you'll notice that the only thing that I have access to are image services, but we also can open up Mosaic datasets and things like that. Or if that Arc server is serving out the image services, I can connect to those as well. So someone's saying, okay, Well, how do I get to the other types of data sets? You simply have to open up the 32-bit version of ENVI, and that allows you to do all of the desktop things. So cool, James, you showed me I can do this. I can connect to Arc service, but now how does it work the other way? How do I get those tools in my framework? So me, you know, I'm just a hair out of that millennial age range. No offense to anyone, but I love technology. I'm a dark mode person, so I've changed my Arc Pro into dark mode. So what you have to do, simply, I go to analysis, I go to tools. That's then going to expose my tools, and if I've installed the ENVI Py for Pro, what I'm going to notice is that there is a new toolbox called ENVI Analytics. I have the deep learning module installed for ENVI, so I also have access to that. So now I can take those TensorFlow classifiers that I built in ENVI and run them from Arc Pro. And I will also have a toolbox for those management tools that I talked about earlier. So again, out of the box, as long as both products are already installed and you run the ENVI Py installer, you should not have to configure this environment. If you do, you just have to point it again to the location of where those engines sit. If you're someone who doesn't have access to your C drive and you put your custom code in another location, you'll just have to make sure you check this box, the set path ENVI custom code, so that any of those custom tools can be accessed. And so what would happen is, okay, I don't want to use any of these out of the box tools. How do I get to a new tool? Pretty straightforward. I click on this create ENVI toolbox. I input the task name. I can input multiple tasks. I know some of you are saying, okay, James, how do I know what tasks are available? So if I'm running ENVI plus IDL, I can do a quick command, e.task. And what that will do is that will list all of the tasks. So right now what it's doing is it's querying for all of the tasks that I have access to. And so again, I mean, topographic shading, spectral, Sarscape, you can see any of these tools. And so all I would do is to make sure that I have no issues. Let's say I want to run QAC, quick atmospheric correction. I simply just copy what that task name is. I input it. I go to where I want to save my output toolbox so I can browse. I typically see here. Right. For the sake of time, because again, I want to get the MapMerger. So this will go, I would add it. I would put the folder where it goes. Once that happens, it's gonna create the toolbox. And then after that, it's pretty straightforward. I can just go to back to my tools, ArcInsert, and go to toolbox, add toolbox, and I would just navigate to where that tool is output to. And again, the same thing with going from a model into that tool. So let's say I have a model, I want to add that tool, open up my modeler, the modeler opens up, I go in here, I open my model, let's see, go to my desktop, find me a model here. Let's say if I had I might have a model in here, just gonna air out. I would simply compile that, or I'm gonna create one really quick. Yep. So let's just go and bring a file in. All right, so it's gonna ask me what type. I'm gonna say a raster. I don't want to really open one. I may want to run ACE. I could, connect these together. And I now want to add this to Arc. So all I do is I go to code, I generate meta tasks. It's going to say, yep, I have no files associated with it. I understand. It's going to show my code, so I could run this as code. But in our case, I now want this accessible to Arc. I would simply bring that up, publish task, name this ENVI ACE, again, copying and pasting. And if I had the proper credentials, I could check these boxes and it would basically minimize that step of having to create the actual toolbox. It would automatically install that toolbox. But if for whatever reason, I don't have those privileges, I simply leave these unchecked. And I then go back through that workflow where I just create ENVI toolbox, take the name of that tool, and it's accessible. So now what I want to do is turn things over to Ben. So Ben, I'm going to make you the presenter. Let me know when you have it. And he's going to walk you guys through just a quick workflow in MapMerger. All right, so Ben, you are now the presenter. And I can see your screen.
All right. Let's see here. Which screen are we presenting? I got to make sure that I'm showing the right one. Are you able to see my import data screen here?
Yep.
Okay. So we want to import data, and I just wanted to demonstrate how quickly this will work. Again, this will work in SDE or it'll work in a file geodatabase environment. So are you all able to see the blue and orange that were imported here into MapMerger?
Yeah, Ben, we got that.
Zooming in on it there. All right, thanks. Okay, so very quickly, I just wanted to essentially show you the speed with which MapMerger imports and also runs the automated matching. So this data set should look pretty familiar. It was on the slides earlier. So the inputs that a user would need to provide MapMerger are simply a search distance here. We're going to search for 10 meters of offset between the two data sets. It generates those links that will show our connectivity, where we're going to essentially put the two data sets together and retain connectivity between them. That's step one of the automated process. Step two is, again, the matching of lines. That'll change our symbology. You'll see some of the darker symbology where features have been matched. And then you'll see these visual cues where the blues are right next to the oranges. That is indicative of a road in each data set representing, well, a single road over imagery. And we would simply use our manual matching tools to go in, connect the data sets up appropriately so that we get a logical shape for our network on the back end. We'll match them to process some attributes and transfer where appropriate. And once we've gone through this data set, again, it was highly automated. You saw all the changes in symbology there. We could take this, say it's an automated feature data set, go through, do the corrections where we need them, and then we merge them. Highly customizable merging options here. So we will create the final data set, again shown in white, and then we would use our create results tool here to write them out officially to an SDE version or a file geodatabase. And that is the very short and sweet demonstration of MapMerger. So I will pass it on back. And,
all right, awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so again, some short, sweet demos of, again, from integrating models to adding analytics to ArcMap Pro, pushing that vector data from ENVI directly into Portal, and then doing something with that data. So whether it be, again, the automatic feature extraction or pulling something from Portal down and really being able to simply conflate that data and again, from being deployed and dealing with multiple data sets from multiple people, because everyone collects in a different way. I really wish I had access to these tools instead of doing that stuff by hand. So awesome demo. And some key points I want to highlight is, just it's the most complete GIS remote sensing geospatial solution, hands down. I'm not just saying that, to toot the horns of either side. Just as an actual user and stepping back and looking at the breadth of tools that are available, from ENVI having the extensibility the numerous GIS tools that have been created for it, that IDL extensibility, to the same thing from Esri, all of the Python tools that are out there and available. And again, ensuring that we can integrate along that entire pipeline. So as people are starting to see that these data sets are growing, but our machines aren't necessarily keeping up with the size of that data, more and more people are starting to move to these more enterprise and cloud solutions that we're ready to play when you are. So a beautiful part about things being a task is, as a task, you write once and use it when you're ready to move it. So that same task that runs in desktop will run in enterprise, it'll run in cloud. You don't have to rewrite that code. So Esri handles large volumes of geospatial data, and we can connect to that from desktop to cloud, and we can plug the analytics along that pipeline. You saw it's very easy to run our advanced image analytics from the ArcGIS interface, which then increases your workflow efficiency because you're not spending, a week going to more formal training. Again, if you already kind of understand the science behind what you're doing, it doesn't matter where you pull the tool from, right? So if I understand how to use a screwdriver or a hammer, I don't need to get a class just because I use a different type of hammer, a framing hammer, versus, a general hammer, right? A general use hammer. We can now create these streamlined process workflows to create these more superior products. So instead of having to open ENVI, I use something ENVI, or I open Arc, I take something from Arc and then I add it. I just run one streamlined workflow. I can just now add that tool set into either side, because you're going to see next week, we're going to also be calling things back the other way. So we'll be calling ARC's tools in ENVI. That's again, a really powerful set of capabilities that, again, either a lot of people didn't know the robustness of the integration and just never really took advantage of that, or again, they haven't necessarily seen why, because either a they've been comfortable in just doing things the way they've done them, which is I use ENVI when I need it, I use Arc. But again, what we wanted to come to within this webinar is saying that, hey, let us help show you the way to utilize both of these a lot more efficiently. And of course, all GIS imagery analysts, without changing those existing workflows. So you can already know how to do something. You're really just adding a more robust functionality in that. So with that, I definitely want to take some time for questions. Thank you all for attending, and I hope that you did learn more about the ENVI and Esri integration, and how to employ them to take your geospatial workflows to that next level. So again, our partners from Esri are on. So if you have specific Esri questions, and I will be here as well to answer any of those ENVI ones. So at this time, do we have any questions?
Yeah, James, we got a couple. One, so OSM import, what schema does it use for the shapefile?
What, from an Esri, an ENVI perspective? Yes. So we don't specifically use any schema. So let me take that back. Depends on how you collect the shapefile. So if you're using something like our feature accounting tool, it does allow you to align some of the fields for that specific feature you're collecting to align with the schema. So ENVI itself does not import a schema. That is where I generally take my students over into Arc and show them how to take the output from ENVI and add it into a schema. So at that stage, you're really free, GGDM or TGD, whatever the schema you want to use. So the closest we actually get to a schema is using the feature counter, because it does allow you to add some fields. So as you're collecting, those can be exported.
One more, James, and this might go out to Matt as well. How would you map out urban heat island hotspots using ArcGIS and ENVI?
Could you repeat that? How would I map out? Urban
heat islands?
Okay.
Using ArcGIS and ENVI.
Yes. I don't know if, someone from the Esri side want to take a stab first? I know we have shown that. We did it for Singapore. We actually created a story map using ENVI to look at Singapore urban heat output where they had like planners. So we basically just used, I think we used some VIIRS data, some freely available data, just imported that in ENVI, ran that, and then added that into a story map.
Matt, are you there? This is Aaron from Esri. I can give you a stab, but I guess there's a lot of ways. It really depends what your workflow is and what kind of inputs you have for the imagery. If you're using imagery, then you have that. But I would say that the short answer is that Esri has a lot of analytical tools, especially now they're starting to get into the geospatial statistic tools that are able to identify hotspots, so hotspot analysis, and be able to identify outliers as well. So I would actually take a look at the spatial stat tools and be able to statistically identify islands and things like that. That's kind of where our technology is going towards now, if that answers your question.
Yeah, he would just appreciate if you could, Aaron or Matt, share a link. He would appreciate it.
Sure thing. Yeah, there's a bunch of tools in ArcGIS for that. There's a specific hotspot analysis tool. So if you have using ENVI to extract the urban areas, or can overlay that with temperature readings, that would be a good tool to use.
It looks like we are at the end of our questions. If there's anybody quickly with a question, feel free. Otherwise, James should be, James, if you, so yes, so first I'd like to mention our next webinar is in 2 weeks on June 3rd. That'll cover the IDL and Python bridge. So if you're proficient with Python, but you want to build some tools in ENVI, this would be a great webinar for you to attend. Similarly, we'll have another webinar 2 weeks thereafter that shows how to create meta tasks using the ENVI modeler.
So really quick,
I would like to. Oh, go ahead, James.
So yeah, have an alibi. So really quick, there will be some prerequisites for the next seminar. So if you're planning on using that, definitely reach out to your appropriate account manager to get your ENVI license. If you don't already have one, you'll need to ensure that you have these things that are on the slides. And again, you all will have access to these slides, so no need to write these things down. But you would need to have these pre-installed if you choose to follow along. After the actual webinar, we will make these things available. So these installers and all that will also be available to you. And this will be led by Mr. Greg Terry. I call him Yoda, longtime IDL programmer, super smart guy. So you guys should definitely not be disappointed. Here's the points of contact that Aaron pointed out for our Esri counterparts. So if you have any specific questions for them, please feel free to reach out to them. If there's something you want to see us do jointly, again, you can reach out to Aaron, you can reach out to Spencer, and they'll do their magic and make us work together. As always, here are our key points of contacts. I've added Ben Wolf, so if you have specific questions about MapMerger, i.e. you want to have a more robust demo, you want to get more hands-on time with it, he would be the gentleman to reach out to. And of course, Spencer, like he said, Aaron's counterpart for ENVI. If you, again, other demos, you have deeper questions, you can reach out to him. And then myself, James Lewis, solutions engineer. If you want presentations or things like that, please do not hesitate to reach out. So Spencer and Aaron.
Yeah, so with that, Aaron, if you'd like to say a few closing words, feel free.
Yeah, actually I would. I just want to tell you guys, thank you very much for allowing us to be a part and participate in this webinar. And one of the things too that I just wanted to do a foot stomp on is that the tools that ENVI provides as an add-ins, what they're doing is actually making it better, making the platform better. And so, you know, those of us that have been involved with map production know that it really doesn't matter what tool you're using. You want to use the best tool for the production flow that you need. And so by bringing these tools closer together, it actually makes it better for the analysts and for the geospatial technicians that are doing production mapping and doing research. So, you know, every step that we're doing to kind of integrate the tools, I think is a benefit for the users. And I just want to tell you thank you for allowing us to speak.
Yeah, certainly, Aaron. We appreciate all of the support you guys have provided for us. I second everything you say. It's a pretty great partnership that we have, and we're happy to work together with you guys to help our users create better products. So with that, I'd like to thank James and Ben and Matt and Aaron for participating today. We will see you guys in a couple weeks, I hope. Everyone take care.